The Atheist Debates Patreon project presents, do extraordinary claims really require extraordinary evidence? Yes, in fact they do. That's it. The end of the video. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We'll see you next. Oh, crap. We can't really do that, can we? The answer is yes. The answer can be no. And I suppose the answer could also be undefined. There's so much confusion about this issue surrounding extraordinary claims and extraordinary evidence that it comes up frequently in debates that I do. It's come up, I couldn't even begin to count how many times some version of this comes up. And it's because some apologists don't think there are such things as extraordinary claims, and they may be right. And some apologists don't think that those claims require any extraordinary evidence, that all claims merely require evidence sufficient to warrant belief. And the people who say that are right. And yet still, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. How can this be? Please tell me, Matt, you didn't just say that the apologists are right, that extraordinary claims don't require extraordinary evidence, and then you also said extraordinary claims do require. Would you make up your mind? You're so confused. How can I possibly listen to you when you're talking out of both sides of your face like that? Good questions. Let's see if we can make this a little bit easier. I would agree with my apologist friends who say that claims require sufficient evidence to warrant belief, and that there's nothing special about any given claim itself. It's just a statement, a proposition. X is the case. X is true. And what sort of evidence would you need to establish that that claim warrants your acceptance, that this claim is now and should be viewed as consistent with reality? And so, yeah, no claim requires extra evidence over some other claim. And that's the way that some of them view it. They think there's claims, and then there's extraordinary claims, and regular claims only require this much evidence, and extraordinary claims require this much evidence. That's the way so many people think about it, and I'm here to tell you that I think that that's the wrong way to think about it. For any given claim, here's the claim. It requires, if we were somehow able to quantify evidence, and I realize that's difficult, it requires this much. Or if we had like a balancing scale and you are assessing a claim, you start putting the evidence for your claim on this side, and when it overcomes evidence against the claim or other perspectives that would undermine this claim, when the weight of the evidence is such, then you accept that claim. And there's no such thing as an extraordinary claim in that sense. But what we're talking about really when we talk about extraordinary claims and how they require extraordinary evidence, we're not saying this claim requires more evidence than this other claim. What we're really saying is there are a number of claims that are utterly mundane. They are ordinary. They are a part of reality. They are something we already accept. The sky is blue, or rephrasing it correctly, the sky appears blue. When I let go of something on Earth, gravity pulls it down. Cats are real, dogs are real, human beings are real. We have automobiles. We have developed machines that allow us to fly, that allow us to dive under the water. We have all of these things that we have discovered that are either facts about the world or things that we have created that are part now of the world. And so all of that evidence is already on the scale. So when somebody comes up and tells me, I just bought a new car yesterday, well, already on the scale is that this person exists, that cars exist, that people buy cars, that it's possible for people to buy cars, that it happens frequently. All of that evidence already exists when the claim is uttered. And the claim is consistent with all of this evidence. And so it may be the case that the claim, I bought a new car last night, requires nothing more for initial assent and provisional acceptance, which is fine. That's what we should be doing. All of our positions should be tentative, provisional. Our confidence level should be proportional to the evidence. And so if somebody comes up and says, hey, I bought a car, now we weigh this against the facts of reality. It's already on the side of the facts of reality. We'd have a scale, and putting I bought a new car is already on the side that is supported by reality. And so it may not need any extra evidence for initial assent. It may need additional evidence for you to be strongly confident in this. For example, if the person who's telling me this is someone who, like I've had friends who were homeless or who didn't have employment or didn't have any source of income, and if one of them were to come and say, hey, I just bought a new car, there's now a slight change in the evidence, and then there's evidence in the world that they are not capable of purchasing a car. And so you might need a little bit more. Hey, show me the car, show me the sales receipt or anything else. It's not that their claim has become extraordinary. It's that every claim, when it is initially uttered, when it is initially evaluated, is weighed against the bulk of reality. And when we talk about extraordinary claims, those are claims that seem to be in opposition to the evidence of reality. Let me see if I can give a couple examples. If someone comes up to you and says, you won't believe what I saw last night, what are they doing? Are they priming you for belief, or are they priming you for disbelief? Most of the time, when somebody says something like that, you wouldn't believe what I saw last night, what they're saying is, I understand that what I'm about to tell you may seem to be extraordinary, but it did in fact happen. And I'm going to say this to you initially because I'd like to put my finger on the scales and push you a little closer to believing me. Because I want you to think that I'm a rational person who understands that what I'm about to tell you may seem preposterous. And I thought it was preposterous as well. And I would not have believed this had this come from somebody else. But I saw it myself. Most people have done that. Most people have experienced that. Most people have been on either side of that conversation. And the truth is, nobody should believe us just based on that. That is actually a propaganda technique to get someone to accept what you're saying, even though it's going to appear outrageous to them. The mere fact that you're acknowledging that this claim seems outrageous or extraordinary at its face seems to, and yet should not, make it more credible. And that's because we operate based on people. If somebody tells us something, we'd like to believe that they're telling us the truth. We don't want to believe that people are liars, because if you run around believing everybody's a liar all the time, you're going to have a very confused life, and you're going to be very lonely, and you're going to be wrong quite often, because while people do lie, people also tell the truth. And we can't simplify things into liars and truth tellers. And so when somebody comes up and says, you won't believe this, but it's true, they're priming you to believe something that perhaps you shouldn't. What you know about that individual, their honesty, their integrity, how gullible they are, how many other things they have believed based on bad evidence, all of that is already on the scale. And if you know nothing about them, this is a method that makes them seem like they're a much more honest, diligent investigator than perhaps they are. Because when they say, I want to tell you something and you're not going to believe this, but it definitely happened, you're more likely to believe them unless you have some compelling evidence that this person isn't truthful, or that this person is gullible, or that the sort of thing that they're talking about just is so outlandish. Like, you won't believe this, but I swear, last night when I was walking home, an alien spacecraft hovered down 10 feet above me. It was a tiny thing. It looked like it was barely big enough for maybe a child, but it hovered right in front of me. It wasn't some kind of remote control device or whatever. And I know this because the aliens then sent a signal directly into my head and told me how they got here and other things, but I don't remember it now. Would you accept that claim? If you thought that that person was truthful, would you believe them? Generally speaking, we don't. We generally think, hey, I believe that you're honestly trying to tell me what you experienced. But that doesn't mean that I believe the conclusion you've reached is reasonable. Well, how does this tie to extraordinary claims? When we say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, all we mean, take the word apart, extraordinary. The claim is something that is addressing something beyond the ordinary, something beyond the mundane, something beyond what we already know, understand, and accept about reality. When you say Jesus rose from the dead, that is a claim that is outside the bounds of the ordinary. We don't have a stockpile of evidence of people rising from the dead. As a matter of fact, all of the evidence that we have is that people don't rise from the dead. And that even, if you pull out the paddles, a defibrillator, and you bring somebody back, that you're not bringing somebody back from dead, because dead is a process, or death is a process, and dead is the finality of it, where you just don't come back from being dead. That's what all of the evidence of reality points us to, that death is the end. And so when somebody says that death isn't the end, what are we relying on? Because I'm not sure that we're relying on evidence in that case to accept it so much as hope. We really hope that death isn't the end. So an ordinary claim requires ordinary evidence. What's an ordinary claim? Something that's already consistent with reality. In fact, we're basically cheating. We're saying this claim is so mundane that we don't need anything but the claim. If somebody says, hey, I had to go buy a whole pack of number 2 pencils for my students yesterday, you're not going to bat an eyelash unless you know something about that person or the situation that runs contrary to what they're saying. But generally speaking, someone saying, hey, I had to buy a whole bunch of number 2 pencils for my class, and they're a teacher, not only are you just going to take them at their word, because everything about that is mundane, although a little sad that a teacher would need to be buying supplies with their own money, but we know it happens. We know it shouldn't happen, but we know it does. Everything about the claim is ordinary. Pencils are real, teachers are real, students need pencils, students need supplies, schools and teachers are underfunded. Some teachers will go out and buy pencils and things like that for their students as needed. We know all of those things are components of reality. So someone telling you that claim, you don't need anything else. In order to have your initial, remember, tentative, provisional acceptance of the claim. On the other hand, if somebody says, hi, I was abducted by aliens last night, that's a claim that doesn't map to the ordinary of reality. It needs some more evidence than merely saying so. The same thing is true for I'm getting messages from a god, I'm getting messages from aliens, I am the special saved anointed child of some sort of God figure. None of those things are parts of reality. And so when somebody says, do extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, what they mean is not that there's something about the claim itself that makes it extraordinary. What they're saying is this claim is of such a nature that it is not compatible with the model of reality that I already accept. And where this gets dangerous is when somebody comes in and says, I believe the gospel authors were honest, and so therefore I think that's enough for me to believe the resurrection. Or I believe, that what little accounts I have from historical sources are trustworthy and reliable, therefore, Jesus rose from the dead and is alive today. Because as soon as you make that mistake in accepting that process to reach the conclusion that in fact a resurrection occurred, that methodology still exists in your head, and it can then be used to assess other claims. And another claim that you might assess could lead you to another belief that is similarly not reasonable, and yet you're going to accept it because you no longer view this claim as being extraordinary. Once you've smuggled in magic and the supernatural because you trust these sources who are coming to you, you're taking what we know about reality and you are adding things that we don't know. And you keep adding those things that we don't know until your model of reality necessarily has to include all manner of supernatural things. You have basically trained yourself to be more gullible, because what a claim that should be viewed as extraordinary, as in here's a claim that goes beyond our ordinary world, is now viewed as ordinary to you. Ordinary with a bit of special pleading. You don't think just anybody can, running around healing the sick or walking on water, despite the fact that I've seen magicians do it. Instead, you've now set up this special subcategory. Here's the ordinary world, and then here's the realm of what a god can do. You've defined that as part of the ordinary world, and therefore you don't think that it requires any extra evidence. And by polluting the ordinary world, and right now I've just got that Depeche Mode song running, the Duran Duran song running on a loop in my head. By polluting what qualifies as an ordinary world, it's no wonder that you would be confused about what an extraordinary claim would be. If I said I could flap my arms and fly up to the clouds, that would be an extraordinary claim. It would be laughably dismissed by virtually everybody. And yet it is rather trivial compared to what a god can do. And so when somebody has smuggled a god into their worldview such that those claims now appear to be ordinary, how do you rule out my ability to fly up to the clouds if I'm not willing to put myself to the test? You can just say, well, you haven't demonstrated it, so I don't believe you, and you'd be right. But if you were to say I was wrong, now you would have adopted a burden of proof. When we say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, all we're doing is saying that the specifics of this claim don't mesh with our current understanding of reality. And if it turns out to be true, it will fundamentally change what we understand about reality. But in many cases, the advocates for the supernatural or for theism don't want to have to face that. They want to think that they have an accurate model of what is an ordinary world, and their ordinary world includes magic, preferably only from just this one being that they like, and the other entities that are sanctioned by that being. But it includes magic. It includes, hey, I don't know how this could work. I don't even know if this could work, but I'm going to assume it can work and that it's God doing it. It is a fundamental redefinition of ordinary. So when people try to say, hey, when you say extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, you're wrong. Claims merely require sufficient evidence to warrant belief. That person is correct that all claims merely require sufficient evidence to warrant belief, but that not all claims are on the same footing with respect to the known knowns within reality. And if your particular claim is outside of what we understand to be real, it is extraordinary, and it will require evidence to show that it is at least on par with those other things that we accept. If not, undermining some of those to show that it is in fact the better option. Hopefully that clears up a little bit about extraordinary claims. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. This video is made possible by supporters of the Atheist Debates Patreon project. You can find more information and add your support at patreon.com/atheistdebates.